Every image you are about to see is from a real place connected to these events and testimonies. And every account in this video was told by a real person who believed they experienced something beyond ordinary explanation. Some call these stories coincidence. Others call them miracles. We'll let you decide. There are places in the world people travel to only after everything else fails. After the surgeries fail. After the doctors stop promising anything. After the nightmares keep returning. After the grief becomes too heavy to carry. And yet, every year, millions still go. Not because they expect magic, but because somewhere deep down, they believe something might still happen. A mother carrying a photograph of her dying son. A veteran who hasn't walked unassisted in years. A woman who says she heard a voice moments before disaster struck. A man who went looking for healing and came back claiming he saw something impossible. And what makes these stories unsettling is that many of them begin the same way, with skepticism. Because most of the people who tell these stories were not looking for miracles, at least not at first. One of the most famous places connected to unexplained healings sits in southern France, Sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes. Every year, millions arrive there, carrying wheelchairs, oxygen tanks, medical files, and quiet desperation. Some leave exactly the same, but not all. One former soldier reportedly arrived barely able to move without assistance. Witnesses later claimed he stood up from his wheelchair near the baths connected to the spring water of Lourdes. Skeptics questioned the story immediately. Doctors demanded proof. Others swore they saw it happen with their own eyes. But that wasn't the strangest account tied to the place, because years later, another woman would arrive, carrying something far heavier than illness: guilt. And according to her family, she returned home changed in ways no doctor could explain. But Lourdes was only the beginning, because thousands of miles away, in another country, another crowd once claimed the sky itself did something impossible. And even now, people still argue about what really happened there. In 1917, thousands gathered near a field outside the small town of Fátima, Portugal. Many came hoping to witness a miracle. Others came to expose a fraud. Newspapers mocked the claims made by 3 shepherd children who said a mysterious woman had been appearing to them for months. But on one rainy October day, something happened that still divides believers and skeptics more than a century later. Witnesses claimed the clouds broke. Then the sun appeared to move. Some said it spun. Others said it pulsed with colors. Some believed it plunged toward the earth. Panic spread through the crowd. People screamed. Others dropped to their knees, praying. Even now, historians argue over whether it was mass hysteria, atmospheric distortion, or something else entirely. But what often gets overlooked are the deeply personal stories that followed. One woman later claimed she had traveled there preparing to say goodbye to her terminally ill child. Another said the experience shattered her lifelong atheism. And decades later, survivors of personal tragedies still describe arriving there emotionally broken, then leaving with an overwhelming sense that they were somehow being watched over. Not healed physically, but restored in another way. And then there was the man who wasn't supposed to survive at all. Years later, after narrowly escaping a devastating car crash, He insisted the reason he swerved seconds before impact was because of a dream he had after visiting Fátima months earlier. A warning. A dream he almost ignored. Coincidence? Maybe. But stories like that are part of why people keep coming. Because once someone believes they've experienced something beyond logic, they rarely forget it. And nowhere is that tension between skepticism and belief more alive than in a small village in Bosnia, where some claim the visions never stopped. Medjugorje does not look like the center of a global mystery. At first glance, it's quiet. Small streets, stone hills, church bells. But for decades, pilgrims have traveled there believing something extraordinary continues to happen. Unlike other miracle sites tied to the distant past, Medjugorje unsettles people because the claims are modern. Living witnesses still speak publicly. Visitors still report experiences they struggle to explain. One former addict claimed he arrived planning to end his life shortly after returning home. Instead, he said he experienced an overwhelming emotional collapse while climbing Apparition Hill. He later described it as feeling seen for the first time in years. Another woman claimed chronic fear and panic attacks that had haunted her for nearly a decade suddenly stopped after a night of prayer there. Doctors remained cautious. Friends remained skeptical. But she insisted something changed. And perhaps the most unsettling part is how ordinary many of these people are. Teachers, mechanics, parents, people with nothing to gain from telling strange stories publicly. Then came the account of a teenage boy who reportedly wandered away during a pilgrimage. Search teams looked for him through the hills for hours. Nightfall approached. Panic spread through the group. Then, according to multiple witnesses, the boy calmly walked back into camp, claiming a woman in white had led him down the mountain. No one else saw her, but the boy insisted she stayed with him the entire time. That story spread quickly, and so did others. Stories of impossible timing, warnings, recoveries, strange feelings of peace arriving without explanation. Not everyone believes them. But that uncertainty may be exactly why these places continue drawing millions. Because people are not just searching for proof, they're searching for hope. And nowhere does that become more visible than on a long road stretching across northern Spain, where broken people walk for hundreds of miles searching for answers. The Camino de Santiago is exhausting. Blisters, rain, loneliness, silence. Some people walk it for religion, others for grief, others because life collapsed and they no longer know who they are. And strangely, many say the road changes them. Not all at once, slowly, one step at a time. A widower from Germany reportedly began the journey after losing his wife unexpectedly. Friends feared he would never emotionally recover. He barely spoke during the first week. Then, one evening, while sitting beside another pilgrim near a small roadside church, he broke down crying for the first time since the funeral. Years later, he would describe that moment as the beginning of his healing. Not miraculous, but deeply human. Another woman claimed she met a stranger on the road who somehow knew details about her personal struggles that she had told no one. When she turned back moments later, the man was gone. She searched nearby villages afterward, but never found him again. Coincidence, exhaustion, misremembered details. Maybe. But stories like these spread constantly along the Camino, and they keep people walking. Because sometimes people aren't looking for supernatural answers,
They're looking for signs they are not alone. And in Mexico City, another site associated with miracles has drawn generations of people carrying exactly that same hope. Only there, many arrive carrying photographs. Photographs of the missing, the dying, the impossible cases. And some claim the answers they receive leave them shaken for the rest of their lives.
Inside the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the atmosphere feels heavy with emotion. Candles flicker constantly. People cry openly. Entire families kneel together in silence. Some walk for days to reach it. And among the crowds are stories almost impossible to verify, yet impossible to ignore completely. One father reportedly arrived after doctors warned that his daughter likely would not survive the year. He prayed there through the night. Months later, her condition unexpectedly stabilized. Doctors called it unusual but possible. The father called it a miracle. Another woman claimed she narrowly avoided boarding a bus involved in a deadly accident after feeling an overwhelming urge to delay her trip following prayer at the Basilica. She never forgot it. Neither did the families who lost loved ones on that same route. And then there are the stories no camera captures, the emotional breakthroughs, the people who arrive numb with grief and leave somehow lighter. Not because every problem vanished, but because something shifted inside them. That may be the real thread connecting all these places. Not certainty, not proof, hope. And maybe that explains why these stories continue spreading across continents, cultures, and generations. Because somewhere between skepticism and belief, people keep encountering moments they cannot fully explain. Moments that arrive at the exact second they are needed most. Moments that feel impossible. And whether those moments come from faith, coincidence, psychology, or something beyond understanding, the people who experience them almost always say the same thing afterward. It changed me. And perhaps that is the real mystery. Some people hear these stories and see coincidence. Others hear them and remember moments in their own lives that still don't fully make sense. A warning that came at the perfect time, a recovery no one expected, a stranger who appeared exactly when they were needed. Maybe these places are miraculous. Maybe they simply help people rediscover hope when they need it most. But one thing is undeniable. People continue arriving there, desperate, and many leave believing something happened they cannot explain. What do you think really happened in these stories? Have you ever experienced something that defied logic or changed your life forever? Like, share, and follow Lanes and Lanterns for more stories that live somewhere between coincidence and the impossible.